because I can't hear whether you can hear me. I'd just like to echo everything Carol's just said as well. Yes, yay Naomi. Okay, so my name's Nicholas, and it's really great to be back at PyCon. So what's my talk? It's about Mu, which is a beginner's Python code editor. And the whole point of Mu is that it's the first text-based code editor that you might want to use, really. Importantly, I'm trying to get you to graduate away from Mu because we've given you just enough support to get you onto the next stage. So if I see there are people using Mu for their real jobs or something, I will have failed, really. I want people to graduate away, okay? So this is a talk about Mu, and it's a talk about how the next version of Mu has been made and what we were trying to do with it. But before we do that, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. This is me in my natural habitat. I'm a classically trained musician. I trained at the Royal College of Music. I was a professional musician. I went through music education. I was 12 years old when I had my first music lesson. This is important, as you'll see, as the talk progresses. So there I am, harping away on my tuba. But like all musicians who find it hard to make a living, the next thing I did is actually turn into a teacher. I was a music teacher. This is me. I'm 23 years old here. This is my first day as a real teacher. And I've just been appointed one of the youngest heads of department in the UK. So I was in charge of a music department. That's my form, who are now all in their 30s. These are amazing children as well. For most of my 20s, I was a teacher, a senior teacher in UK secondary schools. And this interest in education and programming and things has sort of blossomed as I've become a member of the Python community. It's blossomed in all sorts of interesting ways. And one of the ways is I wrote a book about Python education a couple of years ago. It's a free pamphlet. So if you go to the O'Reilly stand in the expo hall and ask them for a copy of Python education, they should have one. If they don't have one, it means they'll just print more next time, which is a kind of a good thing for me, even though I don't get paid for that because it's a free pamphlet. Anyway, so what's the problem we're going to talk about here? For whom is Mu? Well, have you ever tried to teach 10-year-olds how to program? I know some of you are nodding because there's teachers in the room and things. But if we look, this is sort of a classic example of what 10-year-olds are like. You know, there's the kid at the keyboard who's kind of prattling about a bit. There's the guy sat in the middle who's actually, he wants to be serious, but he can't get on the keyboard because his mate's prattling about in front of the camera. And then there's the girl twiddling her hair who's just kind of phased out because, you know, they've just stopped her from being on the keyboard. And it's not a very good situation, okay? Mu attempts to provide these sorts of people, beginner programmers. I don't mean young programmers, I mean beginners. So this could be for grandma as well. It gives them the tools so that they have enough problems as it is, having to learn how to type and program in a text-based programming language. And so Mu aims to try and make it as simple as possible for them, give them the tools to help them. Okay. Unfortunately, the problem is that the tools that we use are written by developers for developers, not learners. So what actually do we perhaps have? Does anyone recognize this? This is VI, which is the editor that I use. And this is kind of like minimalism writ large. And well, I like to think this is what a beginner programmer would sort of like see when they see Vim. It's this sort of opaque kind of minimalist thing. You have no idea what it does or how it works, but it looks a bit frightening because it's kind of big and red, and if you press it, who knows what's going to happen, okay? So that's one way we have developer tools, is uber minimalism with no help at all, but a very steep learning curve, and you kind of have to figure it out for yourself. And then you have the other extreme of text editors, okay? And I need to have all the features and things like that, the maximalist approach. But look at this. You're a beginner programmer. Where do you type your code? Okay, how do you even get the code to run? You don't know, okay? And there's so much going on, and this is information intimidation, okay? It might as well be a 747 that you're looking at. You know, pull the lever, push the button, and who knows what's going to happen next, okay? Now, at this point, somebody usually goes, well, why don't you just use idle? Okay, so I've put never suggest this to Carrie-Anne. Gordon Ramsay, another British sort of person. Carrie-Anne is the Director of Education at the Raspberry Pi Foundation, a good friend of mine. Well, if you want to see Carrie-Anne go incendiary, that's what you suggest, okay? This is the slide that she uses when she talks about IDLE. And there are an awful lot of problems with IDLE. IDLE is a wonderful sort of resource, but it was written in the late 90s. It uses an old windowing system, blah, 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 blah. And because it's like the default editor that comes with Python, you've got kids trying to use it, and they're struggling, okay? So in 2015, here's Carrie-Anne, being magnificent, delivering a keynote to EuroPython. And she explained that she was upset about the current state of affairs with editors. And what she did is she talked us through what are the kind of the must-haves that a beginner code editor should have. Now, please remember, she's the Director of Education at the Raspberry Pi Foundation, perhaps the most successful computing in education project in history. Okay? She not only was a teacher and works with teachers, but they run CodeClubs and they get feedback from teachers, they watch students. So she has a really great perspective on this. This is somebody you should listen to. When she says that doesn't work for a lot of teachers, that she knows because she has the data in the background, okay? So what's this got to do with Mu? Well, at around the same time I was doing some work with the BBC. I was a volunteer representative of the Python Software Foundation on their microbit project. I wrote pretty much most of the tooling and editors and things around the Python aspect of that, and my friend Damien George did all the MicroPython stuff. There was two of us literally writing code in our garden sheds. I have a garden shed where I do my coding. Being a conscientious developer, I showed the teachers, the target audience for the microbit, are the browser-based Python editor that I had written, and there were sort of lots of problems that they were finding. You know, they couldn't connect to the REPL, so for interactive programming. As we saw with Josh's talk, you have to download the hex file, you have to drag it onto the thing, you have to kind of stand on one leg and stick your finger in your ear, and then maybe it might work, and all this sort of stuff. And then it scrolls across the screen, syntax error, line 3. Oh, God, you have to do it all over again, and then before you know it, there's like 2 or 3 minutes have gone and you're just faffing about, okay? So the quick, iterative turnaround of code, do a thing, press the flash button, blah, 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 doesn't work. So I'd got all this feedback. I'd been around several Python user groups in the UK where we'd invited teachers and we got Python people there. I buddied them up for some pair programming, set them some fun tasks, and they had some fun, and I managed to see what the problems were. And I got home, it was a rainy Sunday afternoon in the autumn, and I thought, how hard can this be? Which is a very dangerous thought to have. It's only a simple editor that they need, and Carrie-Anne gave me a checklist of things in her EuroPython keynote of what teachers and beginner programmers want. So hence, Mu was born. And this was, it's a native app, it's a cute app, it's written in Python. Currently, it's only about 3,000 lines of Python, so it's quite a small project as well, and it's well documented, well tested, all this sort of stuff. But Mu was released, and then time passed, as they say in text-based adventure games, and various things happened, and teachers were saying, we really like using Mu with the microbit, but when I want to teach Python, regular Python, I have to go back to using IDLE, and I don't want to do that. And wouldn't it be great if I could do all these other things as well with Python in this text editor? So a lot of the feedback was, well, please can you make this into a generic Python editor? The Raspberry Pi Foundation were very generous and put their money where their mouth was, and they supported me to work on Mu. I worked with Carrie-Anne and various other people, what I did was start to look back at, well, just what exactly am I trying to do with Mu here, because I've been given an opportunity to rewrite Mu. So as a result, I kind of reconsidered what I was trying to do, and this Alan Kay quote sort of encapsulates perhaps some of the stuff that I was trying to look for. I'll read this out to you. Alan Kay, if you're not familiar, is kind of like one of the gods of the internet, founding fathers, you know, that sort of stuff of computing. Invented Smalltalk. And he says, it's kind of like Little League or even T-ball. I'm British. I have no idea what T-ball is. If somebody could tell me in the break, that would be great. But anyway, I can imagine, okay? In sports, they do this all the time. In music, they do it all the time. And the idea is you never let the child do something that isn't the real thing. But you have to work your ass off to figure out what the real thing is in the context of the way their minds are working at that development level, okay? When I read that, I thought, well, this is kind of hits the nail on the head, and this would make a great slide for talks when I'm talking about Mu. And I was also drawing on my experience as a musician. We've had lots of people mention music today, and I was a music teacher. I was a teacher, so I wanted to draw on my skills as a teacher, in pedagogy and things. And I started to draw parallels between coding education and music education that I'd been the recipient of and also the giver of as well. And there are many ways that me as a music teacher can engage children. And I started to think about, well, how might we do that in a coding context? So I want to give you two examples of how we introduce music to kids in the UK. I'm not sure what it's like in the US, but you'll see what I mean if you're in with it. So I'm going to look at two of them. So pretty much most secondary schools, high school you would call them in the US, have a keyboard lab in their music department. And this is a godsend for Friday afternoons when it's raining and you've got a bunch of 11-year-olds, but what you do is you sit them down and they put their headphones in and you plug them in and they can do music lessons, and the music teacher's splitting headache at that point isn't exacerbated by the situation. But essentially what you have are instruments that make it very easy to sound good. You can put a drum beat on, you can stick your headphones in, and blah, 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 blah. There's demos, and they're quite simple to play, and you've got very simple sort of musical things that kids are learning about, okay? You have an opportunity to introduce the very core skills of music, and the very basics of music using an instrument that will make you sound good, okay? So this is a positive thing to do. But unfortunately, you don't really get concertos for Casio keyboards, okay? And they're, in a sense, a sort of a musical dead end, okay? So what happens when you have kids who are engaged with music? They've been to the keyboard clubs of a lunchtime and things, and they think, I'm really into this. I want to do something. And so you get, this is my son, William, with his trombone and his buddies. What do? We give them the real thing, as it were, okay? So Will is playing a real instrument in a real band, and he's playing real, if simplified, music. They also have a real conductor who does real conductory sorts of things, okay? And they really have to listen to each other to work together as a team, so they're learning all these sorts of skills that music brings to the fore. And they give real concerts, and unfortunately parents have to give real money to pay for tickets to go to these things, okay? And the important thing is that Will and all his friends are learning the skills of what it is to be a jazz or a classical or whatever musician, okay? And so a few weeks ago, I was in New York, and I was on a train journey from New York to Boston. And I've been wanting to make this journey for years, really, because when I was a teenager and learning music, I was very passionate about the music of the American composer George Gershwin. And he wrote a piece called Rhapsody in Blue, and he wrote that piece in the train journey between New York and Boston. And he says, I heard a sort of musical kaleidoscope of America, of the vast melting pot, of our unduplicated national pep, no idea what that means, of our metropolitan madness, okay? And he heard this, he talks about hearing the sounds of the train and the rhythms and things, and by the end of this 4-hour journey, he had the plan. He knew he could do this piece. So I was going to go on this journey and recreate this experience of traveling from New York to Boston, and I tell you, it's like a commuter train going into London, really. It wasn't that great. Obviously, George Gershwin was traveling first class, but I wasn't. But inspiration struck, because I asked myself, what if we taught music like we teach programming? Well, we have music boot camps, for example. Learn to music in 12 weeks. Okay? And it even says, train with us and we'll guarantee your first job as a musician. 12 weeks, that's all you need to be a musician. Or, hey, book learning. This is what we need to do. Getting started with tuba. Counting bars rests is easier than you think, okay? Just go read the O'Reilly book. That'll help you out. Or, of course, you could see this coming, couldn't you? There's the, obviously, beginning pianoing, second edition in 24 hours. 24 hours? I mean, you don't need 2 weeks. Why go to a boot camp? You've got a book here that'll teach you in 24 hours. Hang on, 24 hours? This is 30 minutes. Look, learn Python in 30 minutes. This must be amazing. Where do we get this stuff? Well, I'm sorry, this bloke called Guido turns up and spoils it for everybody. You can't actually learn a programming language in 30 minutes. What does he know? So what I'm trying to say here is that Mu aims to be the real thing, okay? And rather than protect the learner by making things oversimplified, it's forcing kids in a supported sort of a way to start to acquire the important skills they need to become effective text-based programming, in this case Python, programmers, okay? And so Mu intends to help with that. And then I kind of flip the question around. So what happens if we teach programming like we teach music? Now, this is a bit of an unfair question because as a classically trained musician, I have 500 years worth of music education I can draw upon. When I was at the Royal College, my counterpoint textbook was written 300 years ago by a guy called Johann Josef Fuchs, okay? So we have all this stuff going on. We've not been programming for that long, okay? So we're still learning. So my idea was, well, can I transpose, not in a musical sense, some of the ideas and the techniques that we use in music education and put them into the way we do coding-related education, okay? So this is the kind of the analogy that I was working to, okay? Scratch and Blockly are a little bit like these keyboards, okay? They make it really easy to take your first steps into programming. You get to move the funky little cat around, and it does silly things and has wonderful adventures. And you're engaged, and you get to learn about what a loop is and all the basic concepts and things like that. Whereas Mu and Python is a bit like school band, okay? You have to work a little bit harder to do this, but you're doing the real sort of thing. And you know what? If Will or somebody else practiced really hard, they could become a professional musician by doing that, okay? And I should have done this last night, but here, what goes here? Edu-blocks, okay? Which is amazing, by the way. And so, as Alan Kay said, you have to kind of work your ass off to work out, well, what is that level that I need to address, to aim for with Mu? So, here's what I was doing. This is the modus operandi of how do we make Mu. So in a revolutionary turn of events, I actually asked teachers what it is that they wanted. Okay, I spoke to about 20 teachers and videoed some of the calls and used that information. Will makes another appearance here. We've been doing the kids track since 2012 at PyCon UK. I have those experiences. I observed about 5 or 6 code clubs from Raspberry Pi, and I also went to visit some of the secondary schools close to where I lived. I was like their captive developer for the day, and I went in and I went, hi, I'm a developer. This is what developers do, sort of thing. And then we did some lessons, and I was able to watch teenagers try and struggle with their Python programming, okay? And also, my day job is as a Python programmer, so as a professional programmer, I kind of know, well, where do we need to get these kids to? What are the important skills that I need kids to be able to learn so that they become effective programmers? It's a bit like you go for your first violin lesson, and the violin teacher says you hold it like that, and you go, you hold it like that? That's really uncomfortable. But after a few years, you figure out that actually you hold a violin like that for some very good reasons, but they just can't tell you that at that point in time. But they started you like that because they knew that in the long term, this is where you were going to. There's a sense of progression, okay? So what did we do? I wrote a whole bunch of stuff. I tested it on people. They said it didn't work or it broke. Well, fix, repeat, etc., etc. Okay? So what did I learn? So these are the essential lessons. Okay? And it boils down to 4 points. Less is more. So remove all the unnecessary distractions. Okay? Keep it simple. So mu is easy to understand and engage with. Walk the path of least resistance. So mu should be actually easy to use, not only understandable, but easy to actually achieve the things you need to do. And have fun. Okay? Mu should enable you to have fun. And so learning is a positive experience. Okay? At this point, I have sacrificed the chicken to the demo gods. So I'm going to try and do a live demo and show you mu. Okay? So let's see if this works. Where's the screen? It's over here. Okay, so this is mu. It's very simple. You write your code here. There are some rather obvious buttons across the top that do the core things that a text editor should do. Okay, and at the bottom, little messages kind of appear here that tell you stuff like, I've saved the file, I've done the thing, blah, 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 blah. There's other information over here which we'd like the children to ignore because teachers might need to use it. But essentially, that's what mu is. Okay? And so what you do, you type your Python code in, and you click run, and it runs, and you click stop, and it stops. Okay? Now, mu is a modal editor. Okay? And currently there are 4 modes, one for CircuitPython, the microbit mode, which is the one that mu originally implemented, Pygame 0 mode, which we'll come to soon, and the sort of Python 3, standard Python 3 mode. Okay? So the thing about Python 3 mode is that actually it has a built-in, very, very simple debugger here as well. Okay? So if I trying to do this live on a big screen, could possibly go wrong. If I click debug now, okay, it's hit the breakpoint. We've got the simplest possible instructions for a debugger, you know, step over, step in, step out, that sort of stuff. And on the right-hand side, we've got a kind of inspector, so kids can actually see what sort of objects are in scope, that sort of stuff. It's the simplest possible thing you could do. So I'm going to step over, I don't know, step into, I can see where my code is moving around, you know, how's Python navigating its way through the code, step out, etc. Let's take away the breakpoint. Come on, mouse, work. Continue, etc., etc., etc. So it's the world's simplest debugger, okay? What else can I show you? So we have a plotter. So if I go into Adafruit mode, here we go. I have a Circuit Playground Express here attached. And Adafruit, if I load the main.py file, and that's actually kind of a simple Simon Says thing, okay? I don't want that to happen. What I want is my goofy game to be there, which is in this. So if I copy that and paste it in here, and then save it, then the device should reboot. Oh, hang on. I obviously didn't sacrifice enough chickens. There we go. Okay, so what all it's doing is emitting tuples, okay? And the plotter, oh, I need to do this again. Okay, now as I move the accelerometer, I'm moving the green line in the middle, okay? And if I, whoops, crash, it's the end of the game, okay? But the important thing is that it's just arbitrary numeric data and the plotter will plot it, okay? This is great for visualizing kind of stuff. What else? Okay, I mentioned Pygame 0 mode. Let's get rid of the REPL. Pygame 0 mode. So a few weeks ago, it was Pi Week. I wanted to see how easy it was to create a game using the Pygame 0 library and mu. And so let's see what happens. This is my entry based on, I'm sort of dog fooding here. I don't know if you can hear the music. No? Okay. That's probably a good thing, actually. Okay. This is all done in Pygame 0. You can sort of kick stuff, and if you get the Python thing, you get anti-gravity and all this sort of stuff, okay? And the whole point is that you try and beat your opponent by jumping over the obstacles and stuff, okay? And this is 300 lines of Python, really, okay? Something that kids could do over 6 weeks, or an A-level student, so these are like 16 to 18-year-olds, could take this and turn this into a generic sort of a game. Okay. What else do we have? Let me get the focus back on this. So this is the old website. We're going to have a new website. What does the new website do? Well, it has a whole bunch of kind of how-tos and tutorials and all sorts of stuff like that. We've got developer documentation that's already published as well. So all this stuff is coming. Okay. 1.0 is coming very, very soon. Once I've figured out how you do packaging properly on OS 10, and then I can release it. It's a pain in the backside, I can tell you. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up now. So here's the call to action. Education makes our future possible. And what that future is depends on who turns up to provide such an education, okay? What are you going to do? So don't just sit there. Do something, okay? Now, I've not finished. I want to talk about people who turn up to do things. So I'm going to celebrate someone and really embarrass him now. Les, this is Les, is sat there behind Kushal. We saw Josh's remarkable presentation earlier. Les is Josh's mentor. You mentioned it's important that we celebrate the things that we celebrate the right sorts of things, okay? And so at this moment, we're celebrating a teacher, okay? As a teacher, I know, and those of you who are teachers will know, you hardly ever get thanked for things, okay? You turn up, you do the marking, you do the things, people complain at you at parents' evening, and then they go away. And the kids, quite rightly, flourish and go on and do things, okay? Because you're a good teacher, and that's the thing that you do. You give the wind in their sails, okay? But every so often, it's important to just say thank you and celebrate a teacher. So I want to celebrate Les here. Now, you might be wondering, what's this rather plucky-looking British guy, First World War fighter ace, doing on the screen? And that's because Les's handle online is Big Les P, and this is Biggles, okay? And when Les came and helped out at PyCon UK in 2013, Les was extraordinarily helpful. Running a kids' day involves unplugging lots of things and plugging other things back into stuff and moving tables, chairs, and all this sort of stuff. And Les was all over it, and we couldn't have done that day without Les. And at the end of that day, I said, you know what? I'm going to get you a Biggles costume for helping out. And it's taken me so long to actually get the Biggles costume and Les in the same room at the same time. So Les, come on, up you come. You're going to get your Biggles costume on. Les, thank you for all the work that you do in the northwest of England. There's an incredibly large, flourishing Python community up there. So I'm crowning you, Biggles. There we go.
Thank you very much.
It's all right. The damn thing's fallen off. There we go. Well done, Les. That's it. Woo! I'm going to stop. Just ask me questions in the break. Thank you.